Walk down the additive aisle at any parts store, and 90% of what you see is snake oil. Bottles promising to double your engine's life, restore lost power, coat your parts in magic. Most of it does nothing, and the FTC has gone after some of the biggest names for exactly those claims. But here's what nobody tells you. Underneath all that garbage, 3 of them actually work, backed by real testing, and genuinely keep your Ford alive far longer. And here's the part that should reframe how you think about this. No bottle on Earth literally doubles your engine's life on its own, and anyone selling you that exact promise is lying to your face. What actually doubles the gap between a Ford that dies at 150,000 miles and one that sails past 300,000 is preventing the specific damage that kills engines early. Carbon choking your valves, gunked up injectors, deposits strangling your airflow. These 3 additives attack exactly those problems cheaply before they ever cost you thousands at a shop. Let's clear up the real enemy first, because it's the thread connecting all 3. Your engine slowly kills itself with carbon. Every time fuel burns, it leaves behind tiny deposits, and over years they build up on your injectors, your intake valves, and inside your combustion chamber. That buildup restricts airflow and throws off your fuel mixture. It causes rough idle and lost power, and on a bad enough engine, it leads to real mechanical damage that costs thousands to fix. AIA found that even a small amount of carbon buildup can cut your fuel economy by as much as 10%. So this isn't just a longevity issue, it's costing you at the pump right now. The whole game of extending your Ford's life is keeping that carbon under control. Now here's the honest part most videos skip, and it changes everything about which additive you actually need. Not every Ford engine is the same, and this matters more than any brand of bottle. If you drive an EcoBoost, which is most modern Fords, you have what's called direct injection. The fuel sprays straight into the cylinder, which is great for power and economy. But it means fuel never washes over the back of your intake valves the way it did on older engines. And that's exactly why your EcoBoost dashboard eventually shows rough running that a fuel additive alone can't fix. Because a cleaner you pour in the tank never even touches those valves. Keep that in mind because it's the single most misunderstood thing about modern Ford engines, and it decides which of these 3 you actually reach for. Let's actually do it. Let's actually do it. Number 1, and this is the easiest and cheapest of all 3, top-tier gasoline. This isn't a bottle you buy, it's just which pump you choose. Top tier is a standard created by automakers, including Ford, that requires far more detergent than the government minimum, and the testing behind it is not marketing fluff. AIA ran an independent study and found that regular gas left 19 times more carbon deposits on injectors and intake valves than top-tier gas did. 19 times. And it gets better. That same AAA testing found top-tier fuel doesn't just prevent new deposits, it actively cleans up existing ones, reducing intake valve deposits by 45 to 72% over about 5,000 miles of driving. So if you've been running the cheapest gas in town and your Ford feels a little rough, switching brands alone can walk some of that buildup back without touching a wrench. The kicker? A found the price difference averaged around 3 cents a gallon. 3 cents to cut your carbon buildup by that much is the best deal in all of car maintenance. Full stop. Look for the top-tier logo on the pump itself. Costco, Shell, Chevron, Exxon, and plenty of others qualify, and it has nothing to do with premium versus regular octane, so you don't need to buy the expensive grade to get it. Number 2, a PEA fuel system cleaner. PEA stands for polyethylamine, and it's the one detergent chemistry that independent testing and mechanics actually agree works, instead of just marketing. This is the bottle you pour in your tank, but only the right kind. Look for products built around PEA specifically. The well-regarded ones are Chevron Techron, Redline SI1, and Gumat Regain. What makes PEA different from cheaper detergents is that it doesn't break down as fast in the extreme heat inside your engine. So it survives long enough to actually reach and dissolve the deposit. These break down the gum and varnish that collects on your fuel injectors over time, keeping your spray pattern clean so your engine burns fuel the way it was designed to. A clogged injector runs rich, wastes fuel, fouls plugs, and can trigger the exact codes that send people to expensive shops for a problem a $5 bottle would have prevented. Here's how to use it right, because most people waste it. Add it to a nearly empty tank right before you fill up, so it mixes at full strength instead of getting watered down in a full tank. Then drive that tank down to nothing. Doing this every few thousand miles or just a few times a year is plenty. You don't need it every single fill up, And dumping in more than the bottle says doesn't clean anything faster, it just wastes product. A bottle costs somewhere around $8 to $15, and it's cheap insurance against injector problems that a shop would charge you hundreds to chase down. On a port-injected Ford, meaning an older engine, this stuff also helps keep your intake valves clean. On those engines, the fuel physically washes over the valves on its way in. But on a direct injection EcoBoost, and this is the honest limit you have to understand, it cleans your injectors beautifully, but it can't reach your intake valves at all, which is exactly why there's a number 3. Number 3, and this is the one specifically for EcoBoost owners, a direct intake valve cleaner. Not a bottle in the tank, a spray that goes into the intake itself. Remember how direct injection means fuel never washes your intake valves? Carbon builds up back there, sometimes badly within as little as 5,000 miles on a hard-driven engine, and no fuel additive on Earth can touch it. The fix is a product like CRC's GDI intake valve cleaner. It uses a P formula that's roughly 150 times more concentrated than what's in premium fuel. It sprays directly into the intake, so it actually reaches the deposits on the back of the valves. CRC's own testing claims it removes a large chunk of the carbon within the first hour. It's the only chemical approach that even makes sense on a direct injection engine, because it skips the fuel system entirely and goes straight to the problem area. But here's the honest warning, and it matters because doing this wrong on a turbo EcoBoost can cause real damage. This is a more involved job than pouring a bottle in your tank. You follow the can's directions exactly, spraying into the intake at the right engine speed. And there's genuine debate among EcoBoost owners about doing chemical cleaning on a turbo engine, because loosened carbon chunks passing through the turbo can hurt it. If you're not comfortable spraying chemicals into your own intake, the guaranteed method is a professional walnut blasting service. A shop physically removes the intake manifold and blasts the carbon off the valves with crushed walnut shells. That costs a few $100s versus the $10 or $15 for a can of spray. But on a badly neglected EcoBoost with 100,000 miles of untouched carbon, walnut blasting is the difference between a top end that breathes freely and one that's genuinely choking and losing power. Think of the spray as prevention you do yourself every so often, and walnut blasting as the deep clean for an engine that's already let it go too far. Now let me save you real money by telling you what to never buy, because this is where credibility lives. First, PTFE additives, the ones marketed as Teflon coatings for your engine, Slick 50 being the most famous name. The FTC took action against these makers over false advertising claims, and Teflon's own inventor, DuPont, stated flatly that it isn't useful as an oil additive. Engine builders and SAE engineers have reviled this stuff for decades, for a very specific reason. PTFE is a solid particle, and while it's supposed to coat your moving parts, it's even more inclined to coat the parts that don't move. Things like your oil passages and your filter, potentially clogging the very system it's supposed to protect. Skip it entirely. Same goes for most miracle oil additives promising to restore or double your engine's life in a single bottle. Here's the thing about oil that the marketing doesn't want you to know. Modern engine oil already contains a carefully balanced additive package, including the anti-wear compound ZDDP, in the exact amounts your specific Ford needs. Oil companies employ some of the best chemists in the world. If a magic additive actually worked, it would already be in the oil because they'd rather sell it to you built in than let a bottle company have that margin. Dumping extra stuff into properly formulated oil can actually throw off that careful balance and do more harm than good. The single best thing you can do for your engine's internals isn't a bottle at all. It's using the correct full synthetic oil that meets Ford's exact specification and changing it on schedule every time. That's it. That's the real longevity secret nobody's putting on a flashy label, because there's no profit margin in honest advice. So how does this actually double your Ford's life? It's not one bottle, it's the stack working together. Top-tier gas in the tank every single fill, so carbon barely gets a foothold in the first place. A P cleaner a few times a year to keep your injectors spotless and spraying clean. And on an EcoBoost, an intake valve cleaning to handle the one kind of carbon your fuel physically can't reach. Do those three, keep your oil and your other fluids on schedule, and you've systematically eliminated the exact failures that send most engines to an early grave. Carbon-choked valves, clogged injectors, deposits strangling airflow. None of it is magic. It's just refusing to let carbon win the slow war it's been fighting against your engine since the day you drove off the lot. One more genuinely useful thing before we wrap up, so you actually know which of these three you need. If you're not sure whether your Ford is direct injection or the older port injection, here's the quick version. Most EcoBoost engines from roughly 2010 onward are direct injection, and that's where the intake valve problem lives. But here's a detail even a lot of Ford owners don't know. Ford actually recognized this carbon issue and fixed it on some of their newer engines by adding port injectors back in, alongside the direct ones. On those dual injection engines, the fuel washes the valves again, so the carbon problem largely takes care of itself, and you can lean more on just top-tier gas and a PE cleaner. If you've got an older single direct injection EcoBoost, the intake cleaning matters most. A 30-second search of your exact engine and year tells you which camp you're in, and that decides whether number 3 is essential for you or just optional. So, let's bring it all together. Top-tier gas, 19 times fewer deposits for about 3 cents a gallon more. A PEA cleaner like Techron a few times a year for your injectors. And on an EcoBoost, an intake spray for the valves the fuel can't reach, or a walnut blasting if it's already badly gunked. Skip the PTFE snake oil and the Miracle Oil additives entirely because your properly formulated oil already has everything it needs. And never forget the real foundation underneath all three. The right synthetic oil changed on time. That's how a few genuinely cheap things add up to a Ford that outlives everyone's expectations, instead of a bottle of magic that empties your wallet and does nothing. If this saved you from wasting money on snake oil, do me a favor and subscribe.